I found my house in the woods. Wrong, empty, and something was waiting inside. I grew up in a place most people only drove through when the sat-nav made a mistake. Wickenholt Fen was a little village in Norfolk, though calling it a village makes it sound grander than it was. It was a church with no proper vicar, a pub that smelled of wet carpet, 6 farms, 2 rows of council houses, and miles of flat black fields cut apart by drainage ditches. In winter, the whole place looked like it had been forgotten at the bottom of a sink. The roads vanished under brown water, the fields became lakes, and the wind moved across everything without anything to stop it. People think forests are frightening because they hide things. The Fens are worse, in my opinion, because they don't hide anything. They let you see for miles, and somehow that makes it worse. You can stare out across a flooded field at night and know there is nothing there, absolutely nothing, and still feel watched. My name is Elliot Marsh. I was 9 when I first understood that Wickenholt was not just lonely. It was wrong. Before that, I thought everyone grew up with warnings like ours. Don't walk near the ditches after dark. Don't follow lights across flooded fields. Don't whistle when the mist is low. And most importantly, according to my Nan, never answer a voice from the reeds, even if it sounds like someone you know, especially then. My mom, Janet, used to roll her eyes whenever Nan said things like that. "Mom, don't fill his head with rubbish," she'd say, while making tea in our little kitchen with the damp patch over the boiler. But she never said Nan was lying. That was the thing I noticed, even as a kid. Adults would laugh, change the subject, call it nonsense, but they still checked the locks. They still looked out of the window when the dogs went quiet. Our house sat at the end of Crow Drove, a narrow road raised slightly above the marshland. On one side was our garden and a sagging barn my dad kept promising to fix. On the other side were reeds taller than a grown man, all rattling together when the wind came through. Behind us was a wide black drain, deep enough to drown in, and beyond that, nothing but Finland. The first flood I properly remember came in February. It had rained for days, not dramatically, not like in films, just steady, miserable rain that soaked everything until the land gave up. By the third evening, Crow Drove was underwater at both ends. We were stuck there with my mom, my dad, my older sister Becca, and Nan, who had come to stay because her bungalow near the church always flooded first. I honestly thought it was exciting at first. No school, candles on the table, Dad cooking beans on a camping stove, Mom pretending not to worry every time the wind shoved against the windows. Becca kept saying the whole house smelled like wet dog, even though we didn't own one. Then the power went. The house changed after that. It felt smaller, but also less safe. The corners got darker. The windows became black mirrors. Every little sound seemed closer than it should have been. Water tapping against the outside wall, reeds scraping each other, something loose banging in the barn. Nan sat in her chair by the fire, knitting without looking at her hands. "Keep away from the back door tonight," she said. Dad gave this tired little laugh. "No one's coming to the back door unless they've got a boat." Nan didn't smile. "That's what worries me." No one said anything after that. A bit later, Mom sent me upstairs to fetch blankets. I remember going slowly because I hated the landing during power cuts. There was a narrow window at the end of it facing the reeds, and at night it looked like a black picture frame. I grabbed the blankets from the airing cupboard and was about to go down when I heard children laughing outside. Not loud, not close, just faint little bursts of laughter carried over the water. I froze with the blankets in my arms. At first, I honestly thought it must be the telly from downstairs, even though I knew the power was out. Then I thought maybe Becca was messing about. But the laughter came again, and this time there was more than one child. 2, maybe 3 of them, giggling, whispering, splashing, outside, in the flood. I went to the landing window and looked down. The back garden was half underwater. The old apple tree stood in the middle of it, black and twisted, its lower branches dipping into the flood. Past that, the reeds moved in the wind, bending and rising like people breathing under blankets. I couldn't see anyone. Then a voice called my name. Elliot. It was a child's voice, small, playful, almost teasing. I stepped back so fast, I dropped the blankets. Downstairs, Nan shouted, "Elliot?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had closed up. The voice outside came again, softer this time. Elliot, come and see. There are moments when fear does something strange to you. It doesn't always make you scream or run. Sometimes it makes you horribly calm. I remember thinking, very clearly, that whoever was outside must be standing in freezing water. I remember wondering why they weren't crying. I remember thinking, if I looked hard enough, I would see pale faces between the reeds. Then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. The laughter stopped. The reeds settled. The house creaked in the wind. And because I was 9 and stupid in the way frightened children can be stupid, I moved closer to the glass again. A handprint appeared on the outside of the window. Not slammed, not sudden. It just pressed there gently, as if someone had been standing on the other side the whole time. 5 small fingers, wet palm, too high up for any child unless they were floating. I screamed then. Dad came running up with a torch. Mum behind him, Becca crying before she even knew why. Nan didn't come upstairs. She stayed below, and I heard her saying over and over, I told you, I told you, I told you. Dad shone the torch through the landing window. There was nothing outside but rain and reeds and black water. But the handprint was still there. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Dad did what adults do when something impossible happens. He explained it badly. He said it must have been condensation. He said I'd touched the inside of the glass. He said fear makes you see things. But he would not touch the window. That was what stayed with me. My dad, who fixed tractors, who once stitched his own thumb with fishing line because he couldn't be bothered going to A&E, stood there pale-faced in his own house and refused to wipe away a child's handprint. Later that night, after Mum had made me sit by the fire wrapped in a blanket, an engine came from somewhere out on the drowned road. We all heard it. A slow diesel sound, chugging through the floodwater. Dad opened the front curtain an inch. A small boat passed the house. There was a man standing upright in it, pushing it along with a pole. He wore a yellow raincoat with the hood up, but the torchlight from our window caught his face for just a second. He was smiling. Not at the house, at me. Nan grabbed the curtain and yanked it shut. Who was that? Mum whispered. Nan looked at me then, and for the first time in my life, I saw real terror in her eyes. That, she said, is why we don't answer from the reeds. If I'm being honest, I tried to convince myself it was just the flood. That's what everyone did in Wickenholt. When something strange happened, you blamed the water, or the isolation, or the way sound traveled across the fens at night. By the time the road cleared and life started again, people acted like nothing had happened. It was almost agreed upon, unspoken but understood. We didn't talk about the handprint. Mum cleaned the window the next morning with vinegar and newspaper, muttering the whole time about damp and old glass. Dad went outside with his wellies and checked the garden like he expected to find footprints, or something broken, or anything that could explain it. He came back in quieter than usual, said nothing, and made tea. Nan didn't clean anything. She just sat at the kitchen table and watched the back door. Every now and then, she'd glance at me like she wanted to say something, then think better of it. What? I finally asked her later that afternoon. She shook her head. Just remember what I told you, love. I didn't open the window, I said, a bit defensive. I didn't talk to them. Nan's knitting needles stopped. Them, she said. I wish I'd lied. I wish I'd said I heard one voice. But I didn't. There were more, I said, laughing. Nan nodded slowly, like that confirmed something she already feared. Good, she said quietly. That confused me. Good? You heard more than one, she said. That means they weren't just trying you on. They were trying to get you to answer back. I didn't like the way she said it, like it was a game I'd nearly lost. What happens if I do? I asked. Nan didn't answer straight away. She looked towards the back door again, then back at me. They don't always stay outside. That was it. That was all she said, and for a while that was enough to keep me scared. But fear fades faster than it should when you're young, especially when nothing else happens. A few days later, the water went down, the road cleared, and everything slipped back into normal. School, homework, muddy boots, Mum complaining about bills, Dad pretending the barn would fix itself if he ignored it long enough. Even Nan started acting like herself again. But things weren't quite right after that. Not in a big way, not something you could point at and say, that's wrong. It was smaller than that, subtle. The dogs in the village stopped barking at night. That might sound like nothing, but out there dogs bark at everything. Foxes, wind, passing cars, each other. But for a few weeks after the flood, there were long stretches of complete silence after dark. No barking, no howling, nothing. Even Dad noticed. "Bit quiet in it?" he said one evening, standing in the doorway with a mug of tea. Mum shrugged. "Cold snap coming, maybe." Dad didn't look convinced. Then there was the smell. It started faint, like damp reeds left too long in a ditch. Earthy, rotting. It would drift through the house for a few seconds and then disappear again. Mum blamed the drains. Dad blamed the barn. Becca blamed me, which was typical. But Nan would just sit very still when it came, her eyes fixed on the back of the house. One night, I caught her standing by the back door, her hand resting on the lock. "Nan?" She jumped slightly, like I'd startled her out of a thought. "Just checking," she said. "Checking what?" She gave me a thin smile. "That it's still shut." That should have reassured me. It didn't. A week or so later, I noticed something else. The reeds behind the house weren't moving the way they should. It sounds ridiculous now, but I remember it clearly. I was in the garden kicking a ball against the fence, and the wind was coming across the fen like it always did, strong, steady, pushing everything in one direction. The apple tree leaned, the puddles rippled, even the loose tin on the barn rattled in rhythm. But the reeds moved against it. Not all of them, just a section, maybe 10 or 15 feet across, swaying the opposite way. Slow, deliberate. I stood there watching them for a long time. I honestly thought it must be my eyes playing tricks on me. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. The wind shifted, the reeds went back to normal, the smell faded, and I went inside, telling myself I'd imagined it. That evening, Dad mentioned something over dinner. "Boat went past again last night," he said casually. Mum looked up. Didn't see properly, just heard it. Nan didn't look up from her plate. Not many boats come this far in unless they've got a reason. Dad gave a short laugh. Probably someone checking flood damage. Nan didn't reply. "What kind of boat?" I asked, trying to sound normal. Dad shrugged. "Little thing. Like before." "Did you see the man?" Dad hesitated. "Thought I did," he said. "Couldn't swear to it." Mum frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dad said, a bit sharper now, "it was dark, Jan. I'm not starting ghost stories over a bloke in a coat." No one spoke after that. But I noticed something. Dad didn't go outside that night, not even to check the barn, not even to lock the side gate. He just shut the curtains early and kept the lights on. That should have been the point where I stayed inside, where I listened to Nan properly, where I stopped going near the back of the house after dark. But I didn't, because when you live somewhere like that, curiosity always creeps in under the fear. And what I didn't expect was how quiet it would be the night I finally went back to the reeds. It was a few days later. Mum had gone to bed early. Dad was in the sitting room watching telly with the volume low. Becca was at a friend's house. Nan had fallen asleep in her chair. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the handprint, the laughter, the reeds moving the wrong way. So I got up, pulled on my hoodie, and went downstairs. The house was warm, safe, normal. The kind of normal that almost convinces you everything else was a dream. I stood by the back door for a moment, then I unlocked it. I remember thinking, I'll just step outside, just for a second, prove there's nothing there. The air hit me straight away, cold, damp, thick with that same faint rotten smell. The garden was dark, but I could see enough. The apple tree, the fence, the black shape of the drain beyond it, and the reeds. They were still, not moving at all, no wind, no sound, nothing. Even the distant hum of the road had gone. I took a step forward, then another. My heart was thumping, but not in a panic way, more like anticipation. Like something was about to happen and I didn't know what. I honestly thought I was in control of it, that I was choosing to be there. Then a voice came from the reeds, soft, close. "Elliot." I froze. It wasn't playful this time. It sounded tired, like someone who had been calling for a long time. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. "Who's there?" I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. There was a pause. Then the reeds rustled, not from the winds, but from something moving inside them, slowly, deliberately. And then the voice came again, not from the reeds this time, from behind me. "Elliot, why did you open the door?" I didn't turn around straight away. People always say in those situations you run or you scream, or you spin round to face whatever's behind you. But that's not what happens. Not always. Sometimes your body just pauses, like it's waiting for your brain to catch up. I remember standing there halfway between the garden and the kitchen, the cold air on my face, the warmth of the house at my back, and that voice right behind me, close enough that I could feel breath that wasn't there. Elliot, why did you open the door? It sounded like a child, but not quite right, like someone copying how a child should sound. I honestly thought it might be Becca messing with me. That would have made sense. She'd hidden behind doors before, jumped out at me, laughed when I nearly cried. For a split second, I clung to that idea like it could save me. Becca, I said, forcing a laugh. Stop it, yeah? It's not funny. Silence. Then something brushed against the back of my hoodie. Not a hand, not properly, more like something soft dragging across the fabric. Light. Curious. I turned then, fast. There was nothing there. The kitchen stood exactly as I'd left it. The table, the sink, Nan's mug still by the kettle. The light above flickered slightly, like it didn't want to stay on, but didn't dare go out either. But the back door behind me, it was wide open. I know I didn't leave it like that. And that was the moment something inside me cracked a little. Not a full panic. Not yet. Just a shift. Like the world had slipped half an inch out of place and wasn't going back. Right, I said to myself under my breath. That's enough. I stepped back inside and reached for the door, meaning to slam it shut, lock it, pretend I'd never opened it in the first place. But as I pushed it closed, I heard it again. Laughter, not from behind me this time, from upstairs. I froze with my hand still on the handle. It was faint but unmistakable. The same kind of laughter from the flood night, 2, maybe 3 voices, whispering, giggling, in the house. I honestly thought someone's inside. That was the first proper thought that made sense. Not ghosts, not Reeds, not whatever Nan had meant, just someone in the house. My heart kicked into something sharper then, faster, focused. Dad? I called, louder this time. No answer. The telly was still on in the sitting room. I could hear it, low and distant, but there was no reply. Dad? Nothing. The laughter stopped. That silence that followed, it was worse than the noise. I stepped fully into the kitchen and shut the back door properly this time, sliding the bolt across with a loud, definite click. It felt pointless the moment I did it, but I needed to do something. Then I grabbed the first thing I could find, a heavy wooden rolling pin from the side. It felt ridiculous. I knew it did. But holding something, anything, made me feel less like a kid standing in the dark and more like I could actually do something if I had to. I moved slowly towards the hallway. The house creaked around me, every little noise suddenly too loud, too close. The stairs loomed ahead, the narrow landing above swallowed in shadow. Dad? I tried again, quieter now. Still nothing. But then, a sound from above. Not laughter this time. A dull, hollow thump, like something had shifted. Then another, closer. Something moving across the floor upstairs. I swallowed hard. My room was up there, Becca's room, the airing cupboard, and the loft hatch. That thought hit me so suddenly I actually stopped breathing for a second. The loft. We never used it. Dad said the boards were rotten, the insulation was a mess, and there was nothing up there worth risking falling through for. The hatch sat above the landing, a square of darker shadow with a pull cord hanging down. I stared at it now. The cord wasn't still. It was swaying, very slightly, back and forth, like it had just been touched. I felt my grip tighten on the rolling pin. No, I whispered to myself, no, 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 because something was up there, and it was moving. Then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. The swaying stopped. The house went quiet again. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, that the laughter had been the telly, the footsteps just pipes or wind or anything normal. And then the loft hatch creaked, slowly, the sound of wood shifting against wood. The cord dropped a little further, and the hatch opened. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough. A thin black gap appeared between the hatch and the ceiling, and from that gap, something moved. At first, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. It looked like a shape pressed against the darkness above, something pale pushing down into the narrow opening. For a second, my brain tried to turn it into something normal, a face maybe, or a hand. It wasn't either. It was too smooth, too bare. Then it pushed further into the light, and I saw it properly. A head, human-shaped but wrong. The skin, if it was skin, looked too thin, stretched tight in some places and hanging loose in others like it didn't fit properly. There was no hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes. The eyes, that's what I remember most. They were open too wide, not just staring but straining, like they were trying to see everything at once. And the eyelids, there weren't any. Just two wet, unblinking shapes reflecting the dim light from below. It leaned down further, and I realized it wasn't just looking. It was looking at me, directly, like it had known exactly where I was the whole time. My hands went numb. The rolling pin slipped slightly in my grip. I couldn't move. I couldn't shout. I couldn't even blink. We just stared at each other. Seconds stretched out into something longer, heavier. Then its mouth opened, not wide, just enough, and I saw that there were no lips either. Only teeth, too many, too small, packed too closely together. It didn't speak, but I knew somehow that it wanted to, that it was waiting for me to say something first. And that was when my body finally snapped out of whatever had been holding it still. I dropped the rolling pin and ran. I don't remember turning. I don't remember moving. I just remember suddenly being in the sitting room, crashing into the arm of the sofa, shouting for my dad. Dad! Dad, there's something! There's... The words didn't come out properly. Dad was already on his feet, confusion turning into something sharper when he saw my face. What is it? What's happened? Upstairs, I managed. In the loft, there's something in the loft. For a split second, he hesitated, and I saw it again. That same flicker of doubt, of fear, the same look he'd had at the window, but then he grabbed the torch from the side table and pushed past me. Stay here, he said. I didn't. Of course I didn't. I followed him, my legs shaking so badly I nearly fell on the first step. We reached the landing together. The hatch was closed. The cord hung still. The ceiling looked exactly as it always had. Dad shone the torch up at it, then around the hallway, then into each room one by one. Nothing. No sound. No movement. No sign that anything had ever been there. Elliot, he said slowly, lowering the torch, what did you see? I couldn't answer. Not properly. Because even standing there, with the house quiet and normal again, part of me knew something he didn't. Something I hadn't understood until that moment. It hadn't just been watching me, it had been waiting. And now it knew I'd seen it. Dad checked the loft anyway. I wish he hadn't. Not because he found anything, but because he didn't. That somehow made it worse. He dragged the stepladder out from the airing cupboard, set it beneath the hatch, and climbed up slowly, torch clenched in his teeth like he was fixing a fuse box instead of whatever this was. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, not daring to go any closer, watching the beam of light disappear into the gap as he pushed the hatch open properly. For a few seconds, there was nothing, just the sound of shifting wood and insulation. Then Dad's voice came down, muffled. It's clear. I didn't believe him, not even for a second. He came back down a moment later, brushing dust off his hands, acting like it was all perfectly normal. But I could see it in his face. The way he wouldn't look directly at me. The way his jaw stayed tight like he was holding something back. There's nothing up there, he said. I shook my head immediately. There was. I saw it. It looked right at me. Dad crouched down in front of me then, trying to keep his voice calm. All right, he said. Tell me exactly what you saw. So I did. I told him everything. The laughter, the door, the voice behind me, the hatch opening, the face, the eyes. I didn't leave anything out. And the whole time, Dad just listened, didn't interrupt, didn't correct me, didn't say it was my imagination. When I finished, he nodded slowly, like he was filing it away. Then he stood up. Right, he said. We're all sleeping downstairs tonight. That was it. No explanation, no argument, just that. Mom didn't like it. What do you mean we're sleeping downstairs, she asked, already irritated before Dad had even finished speaking. Exactly what I said, Dad replied, pulling blankets from the cupboard. Just for tonight. Why? Dad hesitated. That was enough. Mom's expression changed straight away. What's happened? He glanced at me, then back at her. Elliot thought he saw something upstairs. Thought? I snapped, louder than I meant to. I didn't think. I saw it. Mom looked between us, confusion turning into concern. Saw what? Before I could answer, Nan spoke from her chair. Something from the reeds, she said quietly. The room went still. Mom let out a sharp breath. Oh, for God's sake! I told you, Nan continued, not raising her voice, not even looking at her. I told you it wouldn't stay outside if he answered. I didn't answer, I said again, my voice shaking now. Nan finally looked at me. Didn't you? She asked, and for the first time since all of it started, I hesitated. Because I had spoken. I had said who's there. I hadn't meant anything by it. I hadn't invited anything in. But I had responded. That thought lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest. Mum rubbed her forehead. Right. That's enough. Elliot's scared. It's late, and we're not turning this into one of your stories. Nan didn't argue. She just stood up slowly, joints cracking, and moved to the back door. She checked the bolt, then the handle. Then she rested her hand against the wood, like she was feeling for something on the other side. It knows the house now, she said. No one replied. We all slept in the sitting room that night. Or at least, we tried to. Dad stayed awake the longest, sitting in the armchair with the torch resting on his lap, staring at the doorway like he expected something to step through it. Mum lay on the sofa with Becca, who kept asking what was going on until Mum snapped at her to go to sleep. Nan sat upright in her chair for hours, not even pretending to rest. And me, I lay on the floor under 2 blankets, staring at the ceiling. Every creak sounded like movement. Every shift in the house felt deliberate. I kept replaying what I'd seen over and over again, trying to make sense of it, trying to force it into something real. But it didn't fit, not into anything. When I must have drifted off, because I remember waking up suddenly without knowing why. The room was darker, quieter, the fire had died down to embers, and something felt wrong. Not in a loud, obvious way, just a quiet certainty that something had changed. I pushed myself up onto my elbows and looked around. Dad was still in the chair. Mum and Becca were still on the sofa. Nan wasn't in her chair. My stomach dropped. Nan, I whispered. No answer. I sat up properly, the blanket slipping off me. Nan, then I heard it. The back door. Not opening, not closing, just moving. A soft, steady pressure against it, like something on the other side was leaning in, testing it. The handle gave a faint rattle. Once, twice, slow, deliberate. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't make a sound, because something told me, something deep and certain, that if I did, it would know I was awake. The handle stopped. The silence that followed stretched out, thick and heavy. Then a voice, right on the other side of the door, soft, familiar. Elliot, it's Nan. Open the door, love. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it actually hurt. I turned my head slowly. Nan was standing at the edge of the room, exactly where she should have been, looking at the door, not speaking, not moving, just watching it. The voice came again. Elliot, it's cold out here. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again just to be sure. Nan was still there, inside, silent, watching. The thing at the door knocked. 3 slow taps. And then it spoke one last time. This time, it didn't sound like her. Not properly. It sounded like too many voices trying to be her at once. Why won't you let me in? Something in me broke then. Not in fear, not completely, but in understanding. This wasn't just something in the woods. It wasn't just something in the loft. It was learning. Learning our voices, our habits, our house. I pulled the blanket over my head and stayed there, shaking, until the first gray light of morning started to bleed through the curtains. No one slept after that. No one mentioned the voice. But everything changed after that night. Because we all knew, whether we said it or not, whatever was out there, it wasn't guessing anymore. Morning didn't fix anything. It never does in stories like this, but you still expect it to. You expect sunlight to come in, burn off whatever lingered in the dark, make everything feel small and manageable again. Instead, it just made the house look tired. The sitting room was a mess of blankets and cold mugs. The fire had collapsed into gray ash. The windows showed the same flat stretch of fenland, pale and empty under a weak sky. Nothing moved. Nothing looked wrong. But no one spoke for a long time. Dad was the first to stand up. He stretched like he'd just woken from a normal night, like he hadn't spent hours staring at a door that something had been trying to get through. Right, he said. Tea. Mum nodded quickly, too quickly. Yeah, tea. They both moved into the kitchen, clattering cups louder than necessary, filling the silence with ordinary noise. It was forced. You could hear it. Becca stayed on the sofa, hugging her knees, not asking questions for once. And Nan didn't move. She sat in her chair exactly as she had the night before, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the back door. I watched her for a bit before getting up. Nan, I said quietly, She blinked like she'd only just remembered I was there. It didn't get in, I added, trying to reassure both of us. Nan gave a small nod. No, she said. Not properly. That word stuck. Not properly? She looked at me then, properly this time, and there was something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Not just fear, recognition. Things like that, she said slowly. They don't need doors the way we do. I didn't like that answer. What does that mean? I asked. Nan opened her mouth, then closed it again. Before she could say anything else, Mom called from the kitchen. Elliot, come get your breakfast. The moment broke. Nan stood up stiffly and walked past me without another word. That should have been the end of it. It should have turned into one of those strange family stories that gets mentioned once a year and then laughed off. Something you half believe, half dismiss, something that fades with time. But it didn't fade. It settled. That's the best way I can describe it. Like something had taken hold of the place and decided to stay. The smell didn't go away after that. It got stronger. Not constant, but more frequent. Sometimes it would drift through the house for minutes at a time, thick and sour like wet earth turned over too recently. The dogs in the village stayed quiet. The reeds behind the house, I stopped watching them after a while. Not because they looked normal again, but because I didn't want to see when they didn't. And the voices, they didn't come back every night, but they came back. Sometimes faint, like they were far out in the fen. Sometimes close enough that I could have sworn they were just outside the fence. Always familiar. Always trying. I stopped going near the back door after dark. That wasn't something anyone told me to do. It just became a rule I made for myself. Dad started locking it earlier each evening. Mom stopped opening the curtains on that side of the house at night. Becca refused to go into the garden alone. No one said why. We didn't need to. The strangest part, though, the part that stayed with me longer than anything else, was how normal everything else still felt. School went on. People laughed in the pub. Cars drove past on the main road like they always had. Even the neighbors, when we saw them, they didn't act like anything was wrong. But every now and then you catch something. A pause in conversation, a glance towards the fields, a door being shut just a bit too quickly. And once, I remember this clearly, I heard Mr. Hargreaves from the farm down the road talking to Dad. Had them again last night, he said, low enough that he probably thought I couldn't hear. Dad didn't ask what he meant, just nodded. Same as before, he said. Hargreaves spat into the mud. Closer. They didn't say anything else after that. That was when I started to realize something that changed the way I thought about everything. This wasn't just happening to us. This wasn't just our house. It was the whole place. Wickenholt wasn't quiet because nothing happened there. It was quiet because people had learned not to talk about it, not properly. Years later, when I tried to make sense of it, I thought about all the little details that didn't seem important at the time. The way Nan always checked the doors twice. The way Dad stopped going out at night without saying why. The way Mom would sometimes stop mid-sentence, like she'd heard something, then shake it off and carry on. Even the way I started listening. That's something no one warns you about. At first, you hear something strange and you ignore it. Then you notice it. Then, without meaning to, you start waiting for it, listening for it. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, ears straining for the slightest sound from outside, a rustle, a whisper, a shift in the reeds. Part of me was terrified, but part of me wanted to hear it again, to understand it, to prove it was real. And that's the truth of it, I think. That's the bit that stays with you. It doesn't just scare you. It changes how you think, how you listen, how you look at the dark. Because once you realize something is out there, something that knows your name, that can sound like the people you love, that can stand outside your house and ask to be let in, you stop asking if it's real, and you start wondering why it chose you. I wish I could say that was the worst of it, that things settled after that we learned to live with it and nothing more happened. But that wouldn't be true. Because what I didn't understand then, what none of us really understood, was that the night I opened that door, something had already changed. Not just in the house, not just in the fen, but in me. And whatever was out there, it hadn't been trying to get in. It had been waiting for me to notice it. And now that I had, it wasn't going to stop. A few years passed before I went looking for it again. That probably sounds like I had a choice in the matter. Like I made a sensible decision to stay away, grow up a bit, and leave whatever was out there alone. I didn't. I just learned how to ignore it better. By the time I was 15, Wickenhope felt smaller. Not safer, just smaller. Like I understood its edges now. I knew which paths to take, which places to avoid after dark, which sounds meant nothing and which ones didn't. The voices still came, now and then. Never as strong as that first night, never at the door again. But enough. Enough that I stopped questioning whether it had really happened. I never told anyone at school about it. You don't, do you? You don't say, there's something in the reeds behind my house that knows my name. You get on with things. You laugh, you mess about, you act like you're the same as everyone else. But the truth is, I wasn't. None of us out there were. That's how I ended up with Riss. Riss Carter had moved into one of the cottages near the old mill when we were about 13. His dad worked on drainage pumps, which meant he knew more about the water levels than anyone else in the area. Riss didn't talk much at first, but he watched everything. That was what I noticed. He watched the fields, he watched the sky. And once, when we were walking home together, he stopped dead in the middle of the road and stared into a patch of reeds for so long I had to physically pull him away. "What?" I asked him. He didn't answer straight away. "Thought I saw something," he said eventually. "What kind of something?" Reese shrugged, but there was tension in it. Didn't move right. That was enough for me. We didn't become friends because we liked the same music or the same films or any normal reason like that. We became friends because neither of us laughed when the other said something strange. A year later, we added Martha Quinn to the mix. Martha had grown up in the next village over and had a reputation for being odd. Not in a bad way. Just the kind of person who didn't scare easily, who'd walk down unlit roads at night without thinking twice, who'd listen instead of dismissing things. The three of us ended up together more and more often, walking the back roads, cutting through fields, pushing a little further each time, not because we were brave, but because we were curious. And that's how we ended up on Mallow Lane. Mallow Lane wasn't really a lane anymore. It was an old Roman road that had fallen into disuse decades ago, half swallowed by the fen. Most people avoided it, especially at night, because of the stories. Not ghost stories exactly, just stories. Lights seen drifting along the road, voices heard where no one stood, people losing their way, even though the path ran straight for miles. Riss had mentioned it first. "My dad says they show up after heavy rain," he told us one afternoon, kicking stones along the edge of the drainage ditch, when the ground's still holding water. "Lights?" Martha asked. Riss nodded. "Not like torches, not like cars, just there." That was all it took. A few nights later, we met at the edge of Mallow Lane just after sunset. I remember thinking, this is stupid. That was my first thought. That we were three teenagers wandering into a place no one else wanted to be, chasing something we didn't understand. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. The sky was clear, the air was still. The lane stretched out ahead of us, pale and dry, bordered by low hedges and patches of reed that whispered quietly in the dark. "No turning back once we start," Martha said, half joking. Reese snorted. "Yeah, all right." We started walking. At first, it was exactly what you'd expect, quiet, empty. The kind of quiet that makes your footsteps sound too loud. We talked a bit, nothing important, just enough to fill the space. Jokes, bits of school gossip, anything to make it feel normal. But the further we went, the less we spoke. It wasn't something we agreed on. We just stopped. The air changed. That's the only way I can describe it. It felt heavier, thicker, like the space around us had filled with something we couldn't see. Reese slowed slightly. "You feel that?" he asked. Martha nodded. "Yeah, I didn't say anything because I did, and I didn't want to admit it." We walked on in silence for another minute. Then Reese stopped completely. "There," he said. I followed his gaze. At first I saw nothing, just the lane stretching ahead into darkness. Then a light. Small, faint, hovering just above the ground. It wasn't bright. Not like a torch or a phone. More like a dull glow, pale and soft, like something half hidden behind fog. "Do you see that?" Martha whispered. "Yes," I said before I could stop myself. The light flickered, and then another appeared, and another. 3 of them now, scattered along the lane, drifting slightly, as if they were floating in place. I felt my heart start to race. Could be someone messing about, I said, though even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Rhys shook his head. No one's out here. The lights moved, not quickly, not suddenly, just shifted, like they'd noticed us, and then they started drifting backwards, away from us, further down the lane. Martha took a step forward. Wait, I said, grabbing her arm. What? She whispered. They're moving. I know. Yeah, but I hesitated, trying to find the words. It's like they want us to follow. We stood there for a moment, watching them. The lights paused. Then one of them pulsed slightly brighter, just once. And in that brief flicker, I saw something that made my stomach turn. A shape, inside the light. Not clear, not solid, but something darker moving within it, like a shadow trying to form. I stepped back instinctively. No, I said. No, that's not. Rhys cut me off. Did you see that? Martha didn't answer. She was staring straight ahead, her face pale in the dim glow. Don't, she said quietly. Don't follow them. That was the first time she'd sounded afraid, properly afraid. And that scared me more than anything else. The lights drifted further back, slower now, almost hesitant, like they were waiting for us to decide. I swallowed hard. Let's go, I said. Let's just go. Rhys didn't argue. Martha didn't argue. We turned around together and started walking back the way we'd come. Slow at first, then faster. Not running, not yet, but not taking our time either. Behind us, the lights stayed where they were. At least I thought they did, until Rhys glanced back. They're still there, he said. Don't look, Martha snapped. But I did. I couldn't help it. I turned my head just enough to see over my shoulder. The lights hadn't stayed where they were. They'd followed, not close, not chasing, just keeping pace. Always the same distance behind us, floating, watching. And then one of them flickered again, brighter this time. And for a split second, I saw something inside it that looked like a face. Not clear, not human, but close enough. I snapped my head forward and started walking faster. Don't stop, I said. Whatever you do, just don't stop. We didn't speak again until we reached the end of the lane. Only when the road widened and the first distant glow of streetlights appeared did the pressure lift slightly, like something had loosened its grip on the air around us. We stopped then, all 3 of us breathing hard, even though we hadn't run. Right, Rhys said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite work. That was something. Martha didn't laugh. She was still staring back down the lane. They didn't want us there, she said. No, I said quietly. They wanted us to go further. That thought settled heavily between us, because it fit too well. We didn't go back to Mallow Lane after that, not for a long time. But that night changed something. Before, whatever was out there had been distant, at the edge of things, in the reeds, in the dark, watching. But those lights, they had moved. They had reacted. They had followed. And as we stood there, catching our breath at the edge of the safe lit road, I realized something that made my skin crawl. The thing in the reeds, the thing in the loft, the thing at the door. It wasn't just in one place. It was everywhere out there. And worse, it knew when you were looking for it. We should have stopped after Mallow Lane. That would have been the sensible thing. Walk away, pretend we'd seen nothing, go back to school and normal life, and never mention it again. Plenty of people in Wickenholt managed that. They saw something once, maybe twice, and then they drew a line under it and refused to go near it again. We didn't. Because once you've seen something like that, something that moves when you move, something that reacts, you stop being afraid in a simple way. You start needing to know why. And that's worse. It was Martha who suggested the churchyard. St. Barrows, she said one afternoon, like she was mentioning somewhere ordinary. You've heard of it, yeah? I had. Everyone had. It wasn't an active churchyard anymore. Not properly. The church itself had half collapsed years back. Roof caved in, stonework sinking slowly into the wet ground. The graves were older than anything else in the area. Some so worn down you couldn't read them, others leaning at angles like they were trying to get away from something beneath them. People say it's wrong there, Martha added. Rhys snorted. People say everything's wrong round here. Martha looked at him. Not like that. That was enough. A few days later, just before dusk, we found ourselves walking down a narrow, mud-rutted track that led out towards the churchyard. The further we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no wind. Even the reeds seemed to hold themselves still. I felt it before I saw it. That same pressure we'd felt on Mallow Lane, but stronger this time, heavier, like the air didn't want us there. "You feel that?" I muttered. Reese nodded once. "Yeah." Martha didn't say anything. She just kept walking. The track opened out suddenly into a clearing, and there it was, St. Barrow's, or what was left of it. The church stood crooked at the far end, its stone walls dark with age and damp. One side collapsed completely so that the interior was exposed to the open air. The tower leaned slightly, like it was considering falling but hadn't made up its mind yet. The graves spread out in front of it, dozens of them, old, uneven, some marked with crumbling stone slabs, others just dips in the earth where something had sunk over time. And in the center, a small, square fenced area. Iron railings, rusted through in places. Inside, the ground looked different, dry. That was the first thing I noticed. Everything else was damp, soft underfoot, but that patch, maybe 10 feet across, looked pale and cracked, like it hadn't seen rain in years. "No," Martha said quietly. We both looked at her. "Know what?" Riss asked. She shook her head, eyes fixed on the fenced area. "Just no." That should have been enough. It should have been the point where we turned around, but we didn't, because I'd already stepped forward. "I just want to look," I said. Riss followed me without hesitation. Martha swore under her breath, but came with us. The closer we got, the worse it felt. That's the only way I can put it. My stomach tightened. My head felt light. There was a faint ringing in my ears, like pressure building somewhere I couldn't reach. "Something's off," Riss muttered. "Yeah," I said. No kidding. We reached the fence. Up close, the ground inside looked even stranger. It wasn't just dry, it was dead. No grass, no moss, no weeds, just pale, cracked earth like clay baked too long in the sun. And in the center of it, a flat stone, almost buried. I don't know why I did it, I really don't. Even now, thinking back, there was no reason, no logic, just a feeling, like something was pulling at my attention. "There's something under there," I said. Reese glanced at me. "Well, I don't know. I hesitated. It feels like it." Martha grabbed my sleeve. "Elliot, don't." I stepped over the low part of the fence. The moment my foot touched the ground inside the circle, everything stopped. The sound, all of it. The faint rustle of distant reeds, the creak of the church walls, even the subtle background noise you don't notice until it's gone. Silence, complete. It hit me so hard I actually stumbled. "What the?" Riss started. His voice cut off abruptly, not faded, not echoed, just gone, like it had been swallowed. I turned back to him. His mouth was still moving, but I couldn't hear him. I couldn't hear anything, not even my own breathing. The world had gone quiet in a way that felt unnatural, wrong, like something had taken sound itself and removed it. And then, the stone moved, just slightly, a tremor beneath my feet. I froze. The vibration spread through the ground, faint at first, then stronger, like something deep below was shifting. I dropped to one knee without thinking and reached out. My fingers brushed the surface of the stone, and the moment I touched it, the sound came back, all at once, too loud. A deafening rush of noise that made me flinch. Wind, distant birds, Reese shouting my name, Martha yelling something I couldn't make out, and underneath it all, a low, grinding vibration. Coming from the stone. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't in my head. I could feel it through my hand, like something beneath the ground was moving, trying to push up. "Elliot, get out of there!" Riss shouted. I pulled my hand back, scrambling to my feet. "What the hell is that?" he demanded. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't know." Martha grabbed my arm and yanked me back over the fence. "Don't touch it again," she snapped. "I wasn't." "Don't," she repeated. We stood there for a moment, all three of us staring at the circle. The ground had gone still again. The stone looked exactly as it had before, flat, silent, dead, like nothing had happened. Then Reese spoke. "Right," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "We've seen enough. Let's go." I nodded immediately. Martha didn't move. She was staring past the circle, into the trees beyond the churchyard. "What?" I asked. She didn't answer, just pointed. I followed her gaze. At first, I saw nothing. Just the edge of the clearing, where the grass gave way to a line of thin, twisted trees. Then movement. Deep in the shadows. Something shifting between the trunks. Too large to be a person. Too fast to be anything natural. My chest tightened. "Did you see that?" Riss whispered. "Yes," Martha said. The movement came again, closer this time. Branches shook, leaves rustled, and then a sound, low. Deep, not quite an animal, not quite human. A roar. It tore through the clearing, loud enough to make my ears ring. My body reacted before my mind did. Run, I said. We ran. Not calmly, not carefully. Just ran. Back across the clearing, past the broken church, down the narrow track we'd come in on. Behind us, something crashed through the trees. Heavy, fast, too fast. The ground trembled under our feet with each step it took. Don't look back, Martha shouted. I didn't need telling, I could feel it, right behind us. Closing the distance, the sound of branches snapping, of something forcing its way through the undergrowth like it didn't care what it broke. It was almost on us. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. But I didn't slow down. I couldn't, because something told me, deep and certain, if it caught up, we wouldn't get another chance. We burst out onto the wider path at the edge of the clearing. The moment we crossed it, the noise stopped, just stopped. No footsteps, no crashing, no roar, nothing. We staggered to a halt, gasping for breath, hearts hammering, wrists bent double, hands on his knees. What the hell was that? Martha didn't answer. She was staring back the way we'd come. I forced myself to turn as well. The path behind us was empty. The trees stood still. The clearing beyond was silent, like nothing had ever been there. But I knew better. We all did. Because just before I turned away, I saw something at the edge of the trees. A shape tall, unmoving, watching us. And even from that distance, I knew it wasn't finished with us. Not even close. We didn't stop running until we hit the road. Not the little mud track, the actual road. Tarmac. Faded white lines, the kind of place where cars passed and people existed and things made sense again. Even then, none of us said anything for a while. We just stood there, bent over, trying to breathe, trying to slow our hearts down, trying to pretend that what had just happened could be filed away as something explainable. It couldn't. Reese was the first to speak. That wasn't a dog, he said. No, I replied immediately. Martha shook her head slowly. Not even close. We all looked back down the path. Nothing. No movement, no sound. Just the quiet edge of the trees, dark and still, like they were waiting for us to turn our backs again. Reese let out a shaky breath. It stopped at the path. Yeah, I said. Why? No one answered, because we were all thinking the same thing. It hadn't stopped because it couldn't follow us. It had stopped because it chose to. That thought sat between us like something alive. We didn't go home straight away. None of us wanted to be alone. So we ended up at Riss's place, a low brick bungalow near the pumping station where the hum of machinery never really stopped. It was one of the few places in Wickenholt that felt anchored, grounded. His dad wasn't in. Night shift. We sat in the kitchen with the lights on too bright, mugs of tea going cold in front of us. No one touched them. Martha sat with her arms folded, staring at the table. Reese leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, trying to look relaxed. I couldn't sit still. What do you think it was? I asked for the third time. Reese shrugged, but it wasn't convincing. Something big. Not helpful, Martha muttered. All right then, what do you think it was? He snapped. Martha didn't answer straight away. She looked up at me instead. You felt it, didn't you? She said. I knew what she meant. Yeah, I said quietly. When I stepped into that circle. What did it feel like? I hesitated. Like everything stopped, I said. Not just sound, everything, like the place didn't want anything happening there. Martha nodded slowly. Exactly. Riss frowned. So what? It's just some weird bit of land? Doesn't explain something chasing us. No, Martha said. It explains why I got angry. That made me look at her. Angry? You disturbed something, she said, still looking at me. You touched it. You broke whatever was, keeping it still. I didn't break anything, I said quickly. I just touched a stone. And it reacted, she replied. The kitchen fell quiet again, because that was true. It had reacted. Not just the ground, something else, something deeper. What about the thing in the trees? Reese asked after a moment. That wasn't the same as whatever was under there. No, Martha said, it wasn't. So what then? There's more than one thing out there? That question hung in the air. And for the first time, none of us tried to dismiss it, because we already knew the answer. Yes, I said. No one argued. Riss ran a hand through his hair. That's brilliant, that is. Absolutely brilliant. So now we've got what? Underground things, things in the trees, lights on the road. And something that talks, I added. He stopped, looked at me. Yeah, he said quietly. That too. Martha leaned forward slightly. Did it say anything to you tonight? I shook my head. No, not there. But before, she pressed. I didn't want to answer that, but I did. It called my name, I said. Back at the house more than once. Reese swore under his breath. Martha didn't react the way I expected. She didn't look surprised. Has it ever sounded like someone you know? She asked. I nodded. My stomach turned just thinking about it. Yeah, I said. It sounded like my Nan, at the door. That made Reese sit up straight. Right, he said. No, that's not. No. It wasn't her, I said quickly. She was in the room. I could see her. Martha's eyes didn't leave mine. It's learning, she said. That word again, learning. The same one I thought of myself but hadn't wanted to say out loud. How? Reese demanded. How does something just learn people like that? Martha didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked towards the window, out across the flat, dark fen beyond. Maybe it doesn't learn, she said slowly. Maybe it remembers. That was worse, much worse, because that meant it had been there before, long before us, long before any of us. I stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor. I'm going home, I said. Now? Reese asked. After all that? I don't want to stay here. That was the truth of it. Being away from the house felt wrong, like leaving something unfinished. Martha watched me for a moment. Then she stood as well. I'll walk with you, she said. Reese hesitated, then sighed. Fine. I'm not staying here on my own either. We left together. The walk back was quiet, not the natural kind of quiet, the heavy kind. The kind where every shadow feels like it might move if you look at it too long. We stuck to the road, didn't cut across fields, didn't go near the reeds, didn't say much. About halfway back, Martha slowed. What? I asked. She pointed, up ahead, at the edge of the road where it dipped slightly towards a drainage ditch. Something stood there. At first, I thought it was just a post or a tree. But as we got closer, it moved, not stepping forward, not turning, just shifted. Like it had been standing there for a long time and had finally decided to adjust. We stopped, all three of us, staring. The shape was tall, too tall, thin, wrong. I felt that same cold pressure in my chest again. That's not, Riz started. Don't, Martha whispered. The shape didn't come closer, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching. Then slowly, it tilted its head, just slightly, like it was trying to understand us or recognize us. And in that moment, something clicked in my head. Something I hadn't realized before. The thing in the loft, the voice at the door, the lights on Mallow Lane, the thing in the trees, and now this. They weren't separate, not really. They were connected, different parts of the same thing, or something working together, watching, testing, learning. The shape by the road took a step back, then another, and slipped into the darkness beyond the ditch. Gone. Just like that. We stood there for a long time after it disappeared. None of us speaking, none of us moving, because we all felt it, that shift, that understanding. We weren't just stumbling into these things anymore. They were showing themselves, piece by piece. And as we finally started walking again, slower now, more careful, I realized something that made my skin crawl. We hadn't been running away earlier. Not really. Because if it had wanted to catch us, it would have. Instead, it had let us go, and now it was following. We didn't talk about the figure by the ditch the next day. Not properly. Riss made a few jokes about it at school, calling it a scarecrow that had learned how to stand up straight. Martha didn't laugh. I didn't either. It wasn't the kind of thing you could turn into a joke without feeling like you were lying to yourself. But something had changed again. That much was obvious. Before, everything we'd seen had felt accidental, like we'd crossed paths with it. Like we'd wandered too far, stood in the wrong place, looked too long. Now it felt different. Now it felt like it knew exactly where we were. And that thought stayed with me the entire day. I couldn't focus in class, couldn't follow what the teachers were saying. Every little noise made me look up, half expecting to see something in the corner of the room that shouldn't be there. At one point, I actually thought I heard my name whispered from the back of the classroom. I turned around so fast, the chair legs screeched against the floor. There was nothing there, just a few other kids staring at me like I'd lost it. "Everything all right, Elliot?" the teacher asked. "Yeah," I muttered. "Sorry." But it wasn't. It hadn't been for a while. After school, I didn't go straight home. I told Mom I'd be late, said I was going to Riss's again. She didn't question it much. She rarely did anymore, not when it came to me being out of the house. I think part of her was relieved. I met Reese and Martha at the edge of the village, near the old track that led down towards Low House. Low House wasn't its real name. No one seemed to remember what it had originally been called. It was just what everyone referred to it as, a half-collapsed cottage sitting lower than the rest of the land, close enough to the waterline that every flood swallowed it whole. The roof sagged, the windows were gone, and the inside had long since rotted into something barely recognizable as a place people had once lived. Families had come and gone from it over the years. None stayed long. "Why here?" Reese asked, looking at me like I'd suggested we walk into a burning building. "Because it's close," I said, "and because I want to see if it's just out there, or if it's here too." Martha didn't question it. She just started walking. The path to Low House was worse than the others, narrow, uneven. The kind of ground that shifted slightly under your feet if you didn't step carefully. The closer we got, the stronger that smell returned. Wet earth, rot, something old and sour that didn't belong in open air. "You smell that?" Riss asked. "Yeah," I said. Martha nodded once. "It's stronger here." The house came into view slowly, rising out of the low ground like something that had been pushed up from beneath. The walls were stained dark from years of flooding, the wood warped and split, the whole structure leaning just slightly to one side. It didn't look abandoned. That was the first thing that struck me. It looked emptied, like something had been there and then left in a hurry. We stopped at the edge of the broken fence. "No one's lived here in years," Riss said. "Doesn't mean nothing's there," Martha replied. That thought hung in the air. I stepped forward first. I don't know why I always did that. Maybe because part of me had already crossed the line a long time ago. The ground crunched under my boots as I moved closer, the broken shells and gravel scattered around the house, shifting with each step. The front entrance didn't have a proper door anymore, just a gap where it had once been. I paused there. Something about the inside felt wrong. Not in a dramatic way, just subtle. Like stepping into a place where the air had been used too much. "Elliot," Reese said quietly, "maybe we don't go in." I glanced back at him, then at Martha. She didn't say anything, just watched me. And that was enough. I stepped inside. The smell hit me properly then, stronger, thicker. It clung to the back of my throat, made it hard to breathe properly. The floor was bare concrete, stained dark in places where water had sat for too long. The walls were warped wood, peeling and cracked, with old nail holes and scraps of something that might once have been wallpaper. I moved slowly, eyes scanning every corner. Nothing. No movement, no sound, just that oppressive stillness. "Looks empty," I said, though my voice didn't sound convincing even to me. Riss stepped in behind me. "Yeah," he said. "Told you." Martha lingered near the entrance, not fully committing to stepping inside. "Don't like it," she muttered. "Why?" I asked. She hesitated. "Feels watched," she said. That made me stop, because I felt it too. Not strongly, not yet, but enough. I turned slowly, looking around again. The main room was clear. 2 smaller rooms branched off to the side. A back doorway led out towards the flooded ground behind the house. Everything looked exactly as it should, abandoned, empty. Then something moved, not in front of me, behind. A faint shift of shadow across the far wall. I spun around. "Did you see?" Reese frowned. "See what?" "There," I said, pointing. Nothing. The wall stood still. The light coming through the broken windows hadn't changed. Martha took a step back towards the door. "Elliot, let's go," she said. "Just a second," I replied. That was when I heard it. A slow, deliberate step from the other room. Not loud, not sudden, just enough. Reese heard it too. His expression changed instantly. "You heard that, yeah?" he said. "Yeah." Martha didn't say anything. She was already halfway out the door. "Guys," she said, her voice tight. "Seriously." Another step. Closer this time. Something was moving in there. Something heavy enough to make the floor shift slightly under it. I felt my pulse spike. "Hello?" Reese called, his voice louder than it needed to be. No answer, just silence. Then the figure appeared. It didn't rush out, didn't jump at us. It just stepped into view, slowly, like it had all the time in the world. Tall, thin. The skin, if it was skin, looked gray, stretched tight in some places, loose in others, like it had been left too long in the water. It wore something that might once have been a coat, long, dark, hanging off it in a way that didn't quite match the shape underneath. And the hat, that was the part I remember most clearly. A wide-brimmed hat, low over its face, casting a shadow that hid most of its features, except the eyes. They weren't normal, they weren't even close. They glowed, not bright, not like a torch, but like something burning slowly beneath the surface. Green, a dull, sickly green, the kind of light you shouldn't see in something that looks even vaguely human. It didn't speak, it didn't move any closer. It just stood there, watching us. I felt something in my chest twist. Recognition. That was the worst part, because I knew, without understanding how, that this wasn't the first time I'd seen it. "Elliot," Martha whispered from outside. I didn't move. I couldn't. The thing tilted its head slightly, the same way the shape by the ditch had, the same way something in the reeds had, the same way it knew me. That thought hit so hard I actually staggered back a step. "Go," Rhys said sharply, grabbing my arm. That broke whatever hold it had. We ran, out of the house, across the broken ground, back towards the path. I didn't look back. Not at first. I didn't want to see it following. Didn't want to confirm that it could move as fast as the thing in the trees. But halfway up the path, I couldn't help myself. I turned. It was still standing in the doorway, exactly where we'd left it, unmoving, watching. And as I stared at it, trying to catch my breath, something clicked into place in my head. Not a full understanding, not even close, just a piece of it. The lights, the thing in the trees, the voice at the door, the face in the loft. They weren't random, they weren't separate. They were different ways of the same thing showing itself, testing what we would react to, what we would recognize, what we would fear. I turned back and kept running, because I finally understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't just watching us anymore. It was choosing how to appear, and that meant it could get closer, much closer. After Low House, we stopped pretending we were just curious. None of us said it out loud, but it was there, in the way we moved, the way we spoke, the way we kept glancing over our shoulders even when nothing was there. We weren't exploring anymore. We were being drawn. That's the only word that fits. Because even after everything we'd seen, after the churchyard, after the thing in the trees, after the gray man, we still went back out into it. Not straight away, but soon enough. It was Martha's idea again. "We need somewhere further in," she said a few days later, tracing a rough map in the dirt with a stick. "Not the edge, not places people still go." Rhys frowned. "Why?" "Because everything we've seen so far is close," she said. "Near roads, near houses. What if that's not where it starts?" I didn't like that. "What if it is?" I asked. "Then we'll know," she replied. That was how we justified it. We'll know, like that would somehow make it better. So we picked a spot deeper into the fen, past the drainage lines, past the paths people actually used. A place where the land started to rise slightly before dropping again towards the outer fields. Not quite forest, not quite open land, just a stretch of tangled growth and uneven ground that no one really had reason to visit. We packed light, torches, water, a couple of snacks, nothing that would slow us down if we needed to run. That part wasn't even discussed. We just knew. The walkout took longer than we expected. The ground shifted underfoot more than usual, patches of mud giving way without warning, forcing us to take slower, more careful steps. The sky stayed overcast, the light flat and dull, making everything look the same in every direction. "That tree wasn't there before," Rhys muttered at one point. "It was," I said automatically, but I wasn't sure. Martha didn't comment. She just kept walking, checking the direction every few minutes, like she didn't trust the land to stay the same. We reached the spot sometime late afternoon, or what we thought was the spot. "That's it," Martha said, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. It didn't look like much. A slightly clearer patch of ground, surrounded by thicker growth, with a few fallen trees scattered across it. The kind of place you'd overlook if you didn't know what you were looking for. But the air felt wrong. Not heavy like before, not silent, just off, like everything had shifted half a step out of place. "You feel that?" I asked. Rhys nodded. "Yeah." Martha crouched slightly, touching the ground. "It's different here," she said. "How?" Rhys asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. It just is." We stayed there for a while, longer than we should have, talking quietly, testing theories, trying to make sense of something that didn't want to be understood. At one point, I sat down against a fallen tree, staring out across the uneven ground. Everything looked normal, the kind of normal that almost convinces you nothing's wrong. And for a few minutes, I actually felt it. That strange calm, that false sense that everything would be fine. Then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. And that was when I noticed it. "My house," I said suddenly. Reese frowned. "What?" I stood up slowly. "Over there," I said, pointing through the trees. Martha followed my gaze. Then she stiffened. "That's not right," she said. "It was my house, or it looked like it. Same shape, same size, same sloping roof. But it wasn't. Not exactly. The color was wrong. Instead of the dull green I'd grown up with, it had a yellow tint, faded, sickly. The barn beside it was gone. The apple tree in the garden was smaller, and the back door was open. A cold feeling spread through my chest. "That's not possible," Riss said. "No," I replied quietly. "It's not." Martha grabbed my arm. "Don't go closer," she said. But I was already moving, slowly, carefully, like I was approaching something that might disappear if I rushed it. Because part of me thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this explains everything. Maybe this is where it comes from. "Elliot," Martha said sharply, "stop." I didn't. I couldn't. The closer I got, the worse it felt. Not fear. Not exactly. More like resistance. Like something in me was pushing back, telling me not to go any further. But something else, something deeper, pulled me forward. "Just a bit closer," I said. "I just need to see." "That's not your house," Riss snapped. "Look at it." "I know it's not," I said. "That's the point." Martha stepped in front of me. "Elliot," she said, her voice low and urgent, "listen to me. Something's wrong here." "I know. No, I mean really wrong." I hesitated, because I felt it too. The wrongness wasn't just visual. It was everywhere. The air, the ground, even the way the light fell across things. It all felt slightly out of sync, like we'd stepped into something that almost matched reality, but not quite. "What if it's showing us something?" I said. "Or what if it's showing you something?" Martha replied. That stopped me. "What do you mean?" "It looks like your house," she said. "Not mine, not Riss's, yours." I hadn't thought of that, but she was right. The details that were off, they weren't random. They were close enough to be recognizable, close enough to draw me in. I took a step back, the feeling in my chest eased slightly. "That's not good," Riss said. "No," Martha agreed. "It's not." We stood there for a moment, all three of us staring at the wrong version of my home, the open back door, the empty windows, the stillness. Then movement. Inside the doorway, something shifted in the darkness beyond it. My heart lurched. "Did you see that?" I whispered. "Yes," Martha said. Riss swore under his breath. The shape didn't come out, didn't step forward. It just waited. Exactly like the thing in the loft. Exactly like the figure in Low House. Waiting. For me. And that was when it finally clicked. Not fully, but enough. It wasn't just showing me something familiar. It was trying to get me closer. Trying to get me to cross something. The same way it had with the voice at the door. The same way it had with the lights on Mallow Lane. The same way it had waited for me to speak first. I took another step back. "No," I said quietly. The shape inside the doorway moved slightly, just enough to confirm it was there, watching. "Elliot," Martha said, "we need to go." I nodded. This time I didn't argue. We turned and started walking away. Slow at first, then faster. Not running, not yet, but not lingering either. Behind us, the wrong house stayed where it was. At least I thought it did, until Reese glanced back. "It's still there," he said. "Don't look," Martha snapped again. But I couldn't help myself. I turned, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't just still there. It was closer. Not by much, but enough. The distance had changed, without us moving. "Go," I said. This time we ran. The ground shifted under our feet, branches catching at our legs, the uneven terrain threatening to trip us with every step. I didn't look back again. I didn't need to. I could feel it. That same presence. That same attention. Following. Not chasing. Just staying with us. We didn't stop until we hit the main track again. Only then did the pressure lift. Only then did the air feel normal again. We slowed, breathing hard, hands on our knees. No one spoke. No one needed to, because we all knew. We hadn't just seen something strange. We'd nearly walked into something. Something that knew exactly what we would recognize. Exactly what would make us step closer. And as I straightened up, trying to steady my breathing, one thought settled in my mind with a weight that didn't go away. It wasn't just copying voices anymore. It wasn't just watching. It was building things, showing us things, testing how close it could get. And if we hadn't stopped, if Martha hadn't pulled me back, I don't think I would have turned around. I think I would have walked right up to that door. And whatever was inside it, I don't think it would have let me leave. After that day, I stopped going out as much. Not completely. I still saw Reese and Martha, still walked the safer paths, stuck closer to the road, kept things manageable. But something had shifted again. Before, the fear had been out there, in the reeds, in the fields, in the places we chose to go. Now it felt like it had followed me back. At first, it was small things, easy to ignore. A sound where there shouldn't be one. A creak in the wall that didn't match the wind. The faintest suggestion of movement just at the edge of my vision. I told myself it was just my head catching up, that I'd seen too much, pushed too far, and now everything felt wrong because I was expecting it to. But then the voices started again. Not outside, inside. The first time I was alone in the house, Mom had gone into town, Dad was at work, Becca was out with friends, Nan had gone back to her bungalow for the day. I remember thinking it felt good, quiet, normal. I made a sandwich, turned the radio on low, sat at the kitchen table and tried to focus on something simple, something real. For a while it worked. Then I heard it. Mom? It came from the hallway. Soft, clear, exactly like her. I froze mid-bite. The radio hummed quietly beside me. The rest of the house stayed still. Mom? I called back. No answer. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. She forgot something, I muttered to myself. That's all. That was the easiest explanation, the one I wanted to believe. I walked towards the hallway. Each step felt heavier than it should have. Mom? I called again. The voice came back from further inside the house. Elliot. Not answering me, just calling my name. Something cold spread through my chest. Where are you? I asked. No reply, just silence. I moved further in, past the stairs, towards the sitting room. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly. Empty. The curtains were still. The air was still. No one there. I stepped back, my heart starting to race now. Mom, I called again, louder this time. The voice came from upstairs. Elliot, clear, close, exactly like her. I didn't move. I couldn't, because I knew she wasn't there. I knew she hadn't come back, but it sounded so real, so normal, so her. For a split second, I actually thought, what if she is? What if I'm wrong? And that was the worst part. That tiny moment of doubt, that hesitation, because that was all it needed. Elliot, the voice called again, softer this time, almost gentle, like she was trying to calm me down. Come upstairs. I took a step forward before I realized what I was doing. Then I stopped. Hard. No, I said out loud. The word echoed slightly in the hallway. The voice didn't reply, didn't change, just waited. That silence again. Heavy, expectant. I backed away slowly. One step, then another, never taking my eyes off the stairs. Elliot, it said again. This time, something was off. Not enough to be obvious, just a slight shift. Like the voice had forgotten how to be her for a second. I turned and walked back into the kitchen. Faster now, my breathing uneven, my hands shaking. The moment I crossed the threshold, the voice stopped, completely, like it had never been there. I stood there for a long time, staring at the doorway, waiting, listening, nothing. Just the radio, just the normal sounds of the house. Then, the front door opened. I jumped. Mom stepped in, keys in hand, looking slightly confused. You all right? She asked. I stared at her. I started. You just called me. She frowned. No, I didn't. I've only just got back. I didn't answer because I knew she was telling the truth, and that meant something else had said it. That should have been enough. That should have been the point where I told them everything again, where we did something, anything. But I didn't, because part of me already knew what they'd say, that I was imagining things, that I was stressed, that it was just the house settling. And maybe part of me didn't want them to confirm it was real, because if they did, then there was no going back. The voices didn't stop after that. They changed, got better, closer. Sometimes they sounded like Mom, sometimes like Dad. Once it sounded like me. That was the one that stayed with me. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the quiet, when I heard it from the hallway, my voice calling out, Mom? Exactly the way I'd said it earlier that day. Same tone, same hesitation, same rhythm. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding, and then I heard Mom's voice answer, Yeah? From downstairs, real, confused, responding to something she thought I'd said, but I hadn't. I hadn't moved. I hadn't spoken. The voice came again, my voice. Mom, closer this time, right outside my door, and then, Footsteps on the stairs, Mom coming up. "Elliot," she called. "Did you call me?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I was listening for something else, something just beyond the sound of her steps, a faint shift, a presence, right outside my door, something that had spoken in my voice and was now waiting for her. I swung my legs off the bed and rushed to the door, pulling it open before she reached the top of the stairs. Mom stopped halfway up looking at me. "What is it?" she asked. I shook my head. "Nothing," I said quickly. "I didn't call you." She frowned. "I heard you, twice." "I didn't," I repeated. We both stood there for a moment, the air between us tense, quiet, listening. Nothing. Then Mom sighed. "You're overtired, that's all." She turned and went back downstairs. I stayed where I was, standing in the doorway, looking out into the empty landing, because I knew something she didn't, something I hadn't fully understood until that moment. It wasn't just copying voices anymore, it was using them, creating situations, making us respond, making us move, testing how far it could go. And as I slowly closed the door, one thought settled in my mind with a weight I couldn't shake. It didn't need to come inside. Not fully, because as long as it could make us open doors, make us answer, make us step into the wrong places, it already had a way in. And sooner or later, someone would listen. Someone would follow. And when they did, it wouldn't need to ask again. I stopped trusting sleep after that. Not completely, but enough that every time I closed my eyes, there was this lingering thought at the back of my mind that I might wake up somewhere else. Not just in another room, somewhere wrong. For a while, nothing happened. The voices came and went. The house creaked. The smell lingered. Life carried on in that strange, stretched version of normal we'd all fallen into. And then, one night, it happened. Not with a sound, not with a dream. Just suddenly, I woke up, cold. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the darkness, not the silence, the cold. It clung to my skin, soaked into my clothes, settled into my bones in a way that didn't belong in a house with the heating on. I sat up slowly, or at least I tried to. My head bumped against something low and rough. I froze. That wasn't my ceiling. I reached up carefully, my fingers brushing against something damp and uneven. Earth, packed, cold. My stomach dropped. I wasn't in my room. I wasn't in my house. I was underground. The realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in piece by piece as my senses adjusted. The smell came next. Wet soil, rot. That same sour scent I'd noticed before, but stronger now, suffocating, like I was breathing it in directly from the source. My breathing quickened. No. I forced myself to stay still. Panicking wouldn't help. That thought came from somewhere distant, like I was repeating something I'd heard before. Stay calm. Think. I shifted slightly. The ground beneath me was uneven, damp in places, gritty with small stones and bits of root. My hands moved outward, feeling along the surface. Narrow. That was the next thing. The space was narrow, a tunnel, just wide enough for me to sit up properly, just tall enough that I couldn't stand. Something brushed against my shoulder, a root, thin, dry, hanging down from the ceiling. I swallowed hard. "How?" I whispered. My voice sounded wrong in that space. Too close, too contained, no echo, no distance, just there. Then sound. Faint, distant, running water. My head snapped towards it there, ahead of me, somewhere further down the tunnel. A soft, steady trickle, and beneath it, something else. Not a sound, not exactly, more like a presence, a feeling, something further down that same direction, waiting. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second. Think. I hadn't gone to sleep here, I knew that. So how? That thought didn't finish, because I already knew the answer, or at least part of it. The same way I'd known not to answer the voice, the same way I'd known the house in the clearing wasn't real. Something had brought me here, or I had come here, without knowing. That possibility made my stomach twist. I opened my eyes again. The darkness hadn't changed. Still thick, still pressing in from all sides, but there was something else now. Faint, ahead, a glow, not bright, not clear, just enough to suggest space beyond the tunnel. I took a slow breath, then another, and started to move. I had to. Staying still wasn't an option. I shifted forward carefully, my hands sliding along the damp earth, my knees dragging slightly as I crawled. Every movement felt too loud, too close. The tunnel scraped against my shoulders in places, the ceiling brushing the top of my head if I lifted it too far. The sound of water grew slightly louder. Step by step, inch by inch, the glow ahead grew stronger. Not enough to light the tunnel fully, but enough to outline its shape. Roots tangled through the ceiling, small stones embedded in the walls, the ground sloping gently downward, and then the tunnel opened. I stopped at the edge, my breath catching in my throat. The space beyond was larger, a hollow, maybe 6 or 7 feet across, the ceiling higher, the walls rough but more stable. And at the far end, an opening. Not a hole, not a natural gap, something made, framed, wood, old, dark, rotting, a small door, set into the earth itself. Water trickled down around it, forming a thin stream that ran along the ground and disappeared into the tunnel behind me. And beyond that door, darkness, deeper than the tunnel, deeper than anything I'd seen so far. I didn't move, I couldn't, because the feeling, that presence, it was stronger here, much stronger. It wasn't just waiting, it was aware of me, watching. Even though I couldn't see it, my heart pounded so hard it felt like it might give me away. I took a step back instinctively. My heel slipped slightly in the damp earth. The sound echoed softly through the chamber. And then it responded, not with movement, not with a sound, but with something else. A shift, a pressure, like the air itself had changed. My skin prickled. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out. Now, I turned, fast, crawling back the way I'd come, faster this time, scraping my hands, my knees, not caring about the pain, just needing distance between me and that door. Something moved behind me. I felt it, not heard, felt, a subtle shift in the space, like something had leaned closer. I didn't look back, I didn't dare, I just kept moving, faster, harder, until the tunnel began to slope upward, until the air changed slightly, until light, faint, gray, ahead. I pushed forward, bursting out of the tunnel into open air so suddenly I nearly fell. I collapsed onto damp grass, gasping for breath, the cold air hitting my face like a shock. I lay there for a few seconds, staring up at the sky, gray, clouded, normal, too normal. I rolled onto my side slowly, and that was when I saw it. The pond. Our pond, at the bottom of the hill, the fence line just beyond it. The same place I'd grown up running past without a second thought. And right at the edge of the water, that wall, the old wooden structure, the one I'd always avoided as a kid, the one that had never made sense. Now I could see it properly. A low, rotting frame built to the ground, a small opening, a doorway, exactly like the one I'd just seen underground. My chest tightened. No, I whispered, because that meant it connected. That meant it wasn't just out there. It had always been here, right here, at the edge of our land. The thought hit me so hard I actually stumbled back a step. And that was when I heard it. Behind me, from the tunnel, a faint sound. Not words, not footsteps, just movement. Something shifting in the darkness I just crawled out of. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, up the hill, past the fence, back towards the house. Not stopping, not looking back. I burst through the back door, slamming it shut behind me, locking it with shaking hands. The house was quiet, still, exactly as I'd left it. I staggered into the kitchen, leaning against the counter, trying to steady my breathing. How? I started, but I couldn't finish the thought, because I already knew, or at least part of it. It hadn't just been showing me things anymore. It had taken me somewhere real, somewhere connected to the place I'd grown up. And as I stood there, heart still racing, hands trembling, one thought settled in my mind with a clarity I couldn't ignore. That door under the pond, it hadn't been the end of something. It had been the entrance. And whatever was behind it, it had known I was there. It had felt me. And now it knew how to reach me, even in my sleep. After the tunnel, I stopped telling myself it might all be in my head. You can't wake up underground, crawl through something that shouldn't exist, and come out in your own back garden and still pretend it's imagination. Something real had happened, something physical. And that made everything else worse. Because if that was real, then so was everything else. I didn't tell Mom or Dad about the tunnel. I nearly did. Stood in the kitchen that same morning, hands still shaking, trying to form the words. But the moment I looked at them, really looked, I knew it wouldn't help. Mom already looked exhausted, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and doesn't shift. Dad had that same quiet tension in him, like he was holding something down just beneath the surface. They knew something was wrong. They just didn't want it said out loud. So I didn't say anything. Instead, I told Reese and Martha. We met that afternoon by the edge of the River Ouse, cutting its way through the land a few miles from Wickenholt. It was one of the few places that felt different from the rest of the fen. The banks were higher, the ground firmer, and the trees along the edge grew thicker, older, safer. Or at least, it used to feel that way. "Say that again," Rhys said after I finished. "I woke up underground," I repeated. "In a tunnel. It led back to the pond." Martha didn't look surprised. That worried me more than if she had. "You've seen something like that before?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not exactly," she said, "but I've heard things." "Like what?" She glanced towards the trees. "People going missing," she said. "Not properly missing, just turning up in places they shouldn't be, saying they got lost, that they walked somewhere and ended up somewhere else." Rhys frowned. "That's just people being stupid." Martha shook her head. "Not like this." I rubbed my face, trying to steady myself. "It wasn't just a tunnel," I said. "There was something at the end of it, a door, and something behind it." Rhys let out a slow breath. "Brilliant. So now it's got doors as well." "It's always had doors," Martha said quietly. We both looked at her. "What do you mean?" I asked. She nodded towards the river. "Come on," she said. We followed her along the bank, moving through the trees until the ground began to slope upwards. The river curved slightly here, cutting deeper into the land, the opposite bank rising steep and dark with thick woodland. "That side," Martha said, pointing across the water. "What about it?" Rhys asked. "There's an old house up there," she said. "Been there for years. No one goes near it." "Why not?" Martha didn't answer immediately. Instead, she started walking again, further along the bank towards a narrow crossing point where a fallen tree stretched partway across the water. "We're not seriously going over there," Rhys said. "We are," she replied. "Why? Because I think it's connected." That was enough. It always was. We crossed the river carefully, balancing along the fallen tree, the water rushing beneath us louder than anything we'd heard in the fen. For a moment, it almost drowned everything else out, the thoughts, the fear, the quiet that had been building for days. But the moment we reached the other side, it came back, stronger. The woods here were different, denser, darker. The light barely made it through the canopy, leaving everything in a constant half shadow. "This is a bad idea," Rhys muttered. "Yeah," I said, "it is." We kept going anyway. The house didn't appear all at once. It revealed itself slowly, piece by piece, through gaps in the trees, a wall here, a window there, until finally we stepped into a small clearing and saw it properly. It was bigger than Low House, 2 stories, old, leaning slightly like the ground beneath it had shifted over time. The wood was dark, weathered, cracked in places where the structure had started to give way. One of the upstairs windows still had glass in it, clouded but intact. The rest were empty, staring out like hollow eyes. It looked abandoned, but not empty. That feeling hit me immediately, the same one from the tunnel, from the circle, from the wrong house. Something was there. "Tell me we're not going inside," Rhys said. Martha didn't answer. She just walked towards it. I followed. I always did. The front door hung crooked on its hinges, barely attached. I pushed it open slowly, the wood creaking loudly in the silence. The smell inside was worse than Low House. Not just damp, not just rot, something older, stale, like the air hadn't moved properly in years. We stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under our weight, shifting slightly with each step. The walls were bare, stripped of anything that might have once made it feel like a home. "Let's be quick," Rhys said. No one argued. We moved through the ground floor first. Nothing, just empty rooms and broken furniture. But the feeling, it didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. "Upstairs," Martha said. I looked at her. "Why?" She didn't hesitate. "Because it's coming from there." That was enough. We climbed the stairs carefully, each step creaking under our weight. The whole structure felt unstable, it's like it wouldn't take much to bring it down. At the top, there were 2 rooms, one empty, the other not. We heard it before we saw anything. A sound, soft, faint, a voice, a woman, crying. It froze me where I stood. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. "Yes," Rhys said, his voice tight. Martha moved forward slowly. "Hello?" she called. The crying stopped, instantly. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then a scream, loud, sudden, right inside the room. I flinched back instinctively, my heart slamming against my ribs. "What the hell?" Rhys started. The scream cut off, replaced by something else. A man's voice, shouting, not words I could understand, just noise, anger, rage, the sound of something hitting something else, a crash, another scream, then nothing, complete silence. We stood there, frozen, listening, waiting, and then footsteps. Inside the room, slow, heavy, moving towards the door. "Go," Martha whispered. We didn't argue. We turned and ran, down the stairs, across the ground floor, out through the front door. Behind us, the footsteps followed. Slow, deliberate, not rushing, not chasing, just coming. We burst out into the clearing, not stopping until we reached the edge of the trees. Only then did I risk a glance back. The door of the house stood open, and in the doorway, a figure, still, watching. I couldn't see its face clearly, just pale skin, dark eyes, too large, too still. It didn't move, didn't follow, just stood there, the same way everything else had, waiting. We didn't go back, not to that house, not to that side of the river. But that night stayed with me, not just because of what we heard, but because of what it meant. The voices, the mimicry, the way it used sound, used people. It wasn't just copying anymore, it was recreating scenes, moments, things that had happened or things it wanted us to believe had happened. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, one thought wouldn't leave me. The woman's scream, the man's voice, the violence. It hadn't been random. It had felt real, too real. Like we hadn't just heard something, we'd overheard something, something that had happened there, or was still happening. And whatever was inside that house, whatever had been in that room, it hadn't been alone. And worse, it had known we were listening. After the house across the river, we stopped going out together as much. Not because we agreed to, just because it happened. Riss started making excuses. Football, helping his dad, being too tired. Martha still went out, but not with the same purpose, not chasing things anymore, more like avoiding them in a different direction. And me, I stayed closer to home, which looking back might have been the worst place to stay. Because once you stop moving, once you stop pushing outwards, everything you've stirred up has nowhere to go. It just settles around you. That's when I started noticing the others. Not things, people, changes in them. Subtle at first, the kind of thing you'd miss if you didn't already feel like something was wrong. Mr. Hargreaves, for one. He lived down the road from us, kept mostly to himself, always had. But he used to nod when you passed him, sometimes say a quick hello. That stopped. He still stood outside his house most evenings, but instead of looking at the road, he looked out across the fields, always the same direction, always the same stillness, like he was waiting for something to appear. One evening, I passed him on my way back from the shop. "All right?" I said. No response. I slowed slightly. "Mr. Hargreaves?" He turned then, slowly. His eyes didn't focus on me straight away. They seemed to pass over me first, like I wasn't quite there. Then they locked in, and for a second, just a second, I saw something in them, recognition, but not of me, of something else, something behind me. I turned instinctively. There was nothing there. When I looked back, he'd already turned away again, staring out across the fields like I hadn't spoken. I didn't try again. Then there was Mrs. Ellison. She lived closer to the main road, in one of the older cottages that never quite dried out properly. She used to talk a lot. Too much, really. The kind of person who'd stop you for 10 minutes just to tell you something you didn't need to know. Then one day, she didn't. I saw her outside her house, hanging washing. "Morning," I said. She looked at me, smiled, but didn't speak. I frowned slightly. "You all right?" She nodded, still smiling, but her eyes didn't match. They were empty, not blank, just distant. Like whatever part of her had been there before had stepped back slightly. "You sure?" I asked. She tilted her head, the same way the thing by the ditch had, the same way the gray man had. And in that moment, something in my chest tightened so sharply I had to step back. "Right?" I said quickly. "Well, see you." I walked away without looking back, because I didn't want to see if she was still watching me. It didn't stop there. More little things. People forgetting conversations they'd had the day before. Doors left open when they swore they'd locked them. Lights on in houses where no one was home. And always, always, that same quiet tension underneath it all. Like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting. I tried talking to Riss about it. We met up one evening near the edge of the village, neither of us really wanting to go too far out. "You noticed it, right?" I said. I shrugged. "People are weird. Not like this." He didn't argue, just looked out towards the fields. "My dad's been off," he said after a moment. "How?" "Just not right. Keeps asking if I've heard anything. Like he expects me to say yes. That made my stomach turn. What do you say? Nothing, Riz said. What am I supposed to say? I didn't have an answer for that. Has he heard anything? I asked. Riz hesitated. Yeah, he said eventually. At night. Voices. I looked at him. What kind of voices? He let out a slow breath. Mine, he said. That silence again. Heavy, familiar. What did he do? I asked. Went outside, Riz replied. My heart skipped. What? He said he thought I was messing about, calling him from the garden. And, Riz shook his head. I don't know. He didn't say, just stop talking about it after. That wasn't reassuring, at all. Martha told us something similar a few days later. Mrs. Turner's boy, she said. You know him? I nodded. Quiet kid, kept to himself. What about him? He went missing for a day, Martha said. What? Riz said. Yeah, just gone. Left the house in the morning, didn't come back until the next night. Where was he? I asked. Martha shook her head. He doesn't know. That sent a cold wave through me. What do you mean he doesn't know? I mean, he walked out of his house, she said, and the next thing he remembers, he's standing by the old drainage line near the mill, middle of the night. No idea how he got there. No one spoke for a moment, because we all knew what that sounded like. Too much like it. That's not normal, Riz said. No. Les, Martha replied. It's not. I swallowed hard. Did he say anything else? Martha hesitated, then nodded. He said he could hear something while he was walking, she said. Like someone talking to him, not properly, just bits. My chest tightened. What kind of bits? She looked at me. His name, she said. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted again. Not because it was new, but because it wasn't. Because it meant it wasn't just us. It was spreading. Or maybe it had always been there. And we were just noticing it now. I started seeing it everywhere after that. Not just in people, in places. The wrongness. Subtle shifts in things that didn't line up quite right. A fence slightly out of place, a path that felt longer than it should, a tree that didn't match the rest. Little things, but enough. Enough to make you question whether you're where you thought you were. Enough to make you hesitate before stepping forward. And that hesitation, that was dangerous, because the longer you stood still, the more time it had. I didn't realize how far it had gone until I saw him. The man who bought our house. He'd moved in about a year after we'd first started noticing things properly. Nice enough at first, bit rough around the edges, but friendly. I ran into him one afternoon near the shop. He stopped when he saw me, too quickly, like he'd recognized something he didn't want to. You're Elliot, right? He said. I nodded. Yeah. He stared at me for a moment, then glanced away, then back again. You used to live in that house, he said. Yeah. Another pause, longer this time. You ever hear anything there? He asked. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He didn't answer straight away, just looked at me, really looked at me. And I saw it then, the same thing I'd seen in Hargreaves and Mrs. Ellison, that distance, that awareness of something else. I see you sometimes, he said quietly. My heart stopped. What? At night, he continued, out by the pond. I shook my head immediately. No, I don't live there anymore. I know, he said, and the way he said it, that was worse, because he believed me, and still, I see you anyway. The silence that followed felt like it stretched on forever. What do I do? I asked, my voice barely steady. He gave a small, tired smile. You stand there, he said, looking at the water. My chest tightened. Doing what? He shook his head. Nothing, he said. Just watching. I didn't know what to say to that. What could I say? That's not me, I said eventually. I know, he replied, and again, that made it worse. Because if it wasn't me, then what was it? He stepped back slightly. You ever think, he said slowly, that maybe it doesn't just copy voices? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Maybe it copies everything, he finished. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to understand something that didn't want to be understood. Because if he was right, if it wasn't just copying voices, if it was copying people, then this wasn't just something in the reeds anymore. It wasn't just something at the edge of things. It was something that could step into places, into lives, into identities. And as that thought settled in, cold, heavy, unavoidable, I realized something that made my hands start to shake. It wasn't just learning how to sound like us, it was learning how to be us. And sooner or later, someone wouldn't notice the difference. I left Wickenholt not long after that. Not dramatically, not in the middle of the night or after some final terrifying incident. Just Gradually. College in Norwich, a job, a flat that smelled of dust and takeaway instead of damp soil and reeds, distance. And for a while it worked. That's the strangest part. It actually worked. The voices stopped. The smells faded. The constant feeling of being watched, of something just out of sight, eased off, little by little, until I could go whole days without thinking about it. I told myself I'd grown out of it, that it had been the place, the isolation, the way everything out there made your mind fill in the gaps. I even started to believe it. Mostly, but there were moments. Small ones. A voice in the wrong place. A reflection that didn't quite match. A dream that felt a little too real. Nothing like before. Nothing I couldn't brush off. Until the letter arrived. It wasn't anything dramatic. Just a plain envelope. No return address. My name written in a hand I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No explanation. Just one line. It's still here. I didn't need to ask what it meant. I knew. I tried to ignore it. For a few days, I left it on the table, telling myself it could have been anyone. A joke, a coincidence, someone from the village messing about. But that wasn't true, because no one joked about that, not properly. So I went back. I told myself it was just to prove something, that it was all over, that whatever had happened had stayed there, that I could walk through it now without feeling anything. I drove in just before dusk. Same road, same turn, same long stretch of flat land opening out on either side, but it felt smaller now, quieter, not safer, just emptier. The pub was still there, the church, the houses, but there were fewer lights on, fewer cars, fewer signs that people were still living their lives the way they used to. I parked at the edge of Crow Drove and got out. The air hit me straight away. That same damp, heavy smell, fainter than before, but still there, waiting. I stood there for a moment, looking down the road, my road, where I'd grown up, where everything had started, and for a second, just a second, I almost got back in the car, but I didn't because I needed to knock, slowly, past the houses, past the barn that had finally collapsed in on itself, past the fence line, until I reached it. My old house, or what was left of it. The paint had peeled away, the windows were dull, the garden overgrown, but it was still standing, still there, the same, and not the same at all. I moved closer, step by step, half expecting something to happen, for a voice to call out, for something to move in the corner of my vision. But nothing did. It was quiet, too quiet. I reached the front gate, pushed it open. It creaked the same way it always had. That small, familiar sound hit harder than anything else, because it meant something was still the same. I stepped into the garden. The grass was longer now, untended. The apple tree stood crooked, its branches bare, and the back of the house, the back door was open. My chest tightened. Of course it was. I walked towards it slowly, each step heavier than the last. The smell grew stronger, that same damp, rotten scent, coming from inside. I stopped just short of the doorway, listening. Nothing, no voices, no movement, just silence. I could leave then, turn around, walk away, get back in the car and never come back. That would have been the right choice. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. So I stepped inside. The kitchen was empty, dust covering the surfaces, the same layout, the same shapes, but stripped of everything that had made it ours. I moved through it slowly, each step echoing slightly, each room exactly where I remembered it, exactly how it shouldn't have been, until I reached the back, the door that led out to the pond. It stood open. The wind didn't move it, the air didn't touch it. It just waited. I stepped through. The garden behind the house was worse than I expected. Overgrown, uneven, the fence line barely visible through the weeds, but the pond was still there, dark, still, and at the edge of it, the wall, that low, rotting structure, the doorway. I felt that same pressure in my chest again, stronger now, like something had been waiting for me to come back. I took a step closer, then another, and that was when I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the water, facing the pond, still, silent. My breath caught, because I knew who it was, or who it looked like, me. Not exactly, not perfectly, but close enough. Same height, same shape, same stance. Standing there, watching the water. I didn't move, couldn't, because part of me knew if I stepped closer, it would turn, and I didn't want to see its face. Elliot, the voice came from behind me, soft, familiar. I closed my eyes. For a moment I thought, don't turn, don't answer. Nan's voice echoed in my head, Never answer from the reeds, but the voice, it sounded like her, exactly like her, gentle, worried, the way she used to sound when she called me in at night. Elliot, love, come away from there. My chest tightened because that was new. That was different. It wasn't asking me to come closer. It was telling me to leave, to step back, to get away. And for a moment, just a moment, I believed it. I believed that maybe this time it wasn't trying to trick me. I started to turn. Then I stopped because something didn't feel right. Not wrong, just off. The tone, the timing, too perfect, too careful. I opened my eyes. The figure by the pond hadn't moved, still facing the water, still waiting. And that was when I understood. It wasn't trying to get me to go forward anymore. It was trying to get me to turn, to face it. I took a step back instead, slow, careful. The voice behind me didn't change. Elliot, it said again, softer now. Please. I didn't answer. I didn't turn. I just kept stepping back, one step, then another. The pressure in the air shifted slightly, like something adjusting, recalculating. The voice came again, not Nan's this time, not properly. The edges of it broke, split, layered, multiple tones trying to hold the same shape. Why? Won't you listen? I turned then, but not fully, just enough to see behind me. There was nothing there, just the open garden, the house behind it, empty, still. I looked back at the pond. The figure was gone. The water was still, dark, silent, like it had never been there at all. I stood there for a long time, not moving, not thinking, just existing in that space between what I'd seen and what I could explain. Then I left, walked back through the house, out to the road, got in my car, and drove. I didn't look back. Not once. I haven't been back since, but sometimes, even now, when it's quiet, when the air feels just a little too still, I hear it. Faint, distant, from somewhere I can't quite place. My name, called softly, patiently, and every now and then, just for a second, it sounds like me. And that's the part that stays with you. Not the things you see, not the places you go, but the way it learns, the way it waits, the way it doesn't need you to believe in it, only to listen. So if you ever find yourself somewhere quiet, somewhere flat and empty and still, and you hear your name called from somewhere it shouldn't be, don't answer, don't look, and whatever you do, never answer from the reeds. What would you do if you heard your own voice calling from an empty room? If you enjoy horror stories, disturbing true-style tales, and spine-chilling encounters that make you check your locks at night, this one is for you. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss truly terrifying horror stories and unsolved mysteries. What do you think about this story? Was it something supernatural or something else entirely? Share your thoughts below. Hit like if you found this video compelling and want more eerie, unsettling stories like this. And remember, if you ever hear your name called from somewhere it shouldn't be, don't answer.